I've always been a straightforward guy. Work hard, stay true to your word, treat people with respect. That's how my parents raised me, and I carried those values into everything I did, including my marriage to Christine. We've been married 5 years now, and for the most part, I'd say we've had a good life together. At least, that's what I thought. She's a high school teacher, full of energy, always the center of attention in any room. Her students love her, her friends rely on her, and she's the type that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world when she talks to you. And then there's me, Brandon, a regular IT guy who's just been trying to work his way up. I never thought I was anything special, but I knew I wanted stability, a family, and a future, and I thought she wanted those same things. You might say I put Christine on a bit of a pedestal, and maybe that was a mistake. But we've been building something solid, or so I thought. About 2 months ago, I signed a big contract, a major client with offices all over the country. Landing that account was a huge deal. It meant a pay raise, better hours, even the chance to work from home. I couldn't wait to tell Christine, thinking this was our moment to start that new chapter we'd always talked about. I even thought this might be a good time to finally try for kids, settle down a bit more. I've wanted a family since I was a kid myself, and now I felt like I was finally in a position to make that dream a reality. So I told her the news, expecting, I don't know, some excitement, maybe a little enthusiasm. But when I looked at her, I could tell something was different. She didn't respond the way she usually would. Instead of jumping up and hugging me, she just smiled a bit, almost distractedly. She told me she was proud of me, but something about the way she said it felt off. I shrugged it off at the time, assuming she was just tired after a long day with her students. Teaching takes a lot out of you, I get that. But still, it was like a little shadow had crossed our lives. I couldn't shake the feeling, but I told myself not to read too much into it. Then a few weeks later, Christine and I went on a camping trip with my boss, Richard. It was supposed to be a team-building thing, just a couple of days out in nature. I thought it'd be a great way to unwind and get to know Richard better. He's a charismatic guy, a bit of a big shot in the company, someone I looked up to in a way. Christine had always said she liked him too, said he was funny and confident. And I remember how often she'd tell me how lucky I was to have someone like him as a mentor. I was glad she got along with him. After all, it's not every day you meet someone who makes you feel like you're a part of something bigger. But after that trip, things between us began to change. I noticed it almost right away. Christine was different, quieter, a bit more distant. She started pulling away, physically and emotionally, little by little. It wasn't obvious at first. It was just small things. When I'd go to hug her, she'd hold back a bit. When I asked her about her day, she'd brush off the question or give me a vague answer. The little spark that had been between us for years, it was like it had dimmed overnight. One night I asked her about it. I said, "Is something going on?" She gave me this long, searching look and then shrugged, saying she was just tired and maybe stressed from work. But I knew my wife. I knew when something was on her mind, and I knew when she was holding back. She seemed almost guarded, like she was hiding something. That's when I started noticing all the other little things. She'd stay out a bit later than usual, saying she had to meet up with colleagues or help students with assignments. She started making excuses not to do things we'd always done together. Even our regular Friday nights on the couch, watching our favorite shows, became less frequent. There was always some reason she had to be somewhere else, some last-minute meeting or errand. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Christine is a social person, and it wasn't unusual for her to be out with friends or colleagues. I trusted her. I trusted her completely, maybe more than I should have. So I tried to brush off those nagging feelings, try to tell myself that it was just my own stress or insecurities making me feel this way. After all, she was my wife. She was supposed to be the one person I could rely on, no matter what. But those feelings didn't go away. Instead, they got stronger. I'd catch her on her phone late at night, smiling at messages, but never telling me who they were from. She'd startle if I walked into the room while she was texting, quickly locking her screen. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water, and I found her sitting in the living room on her phone with this look on her face I'd never seen before, almost like she was scared. It was subtle, but I could feel the distance growing between us. We went from talking about everything to barely holding a conversation. I tried to bring up the idea of starting a family again, hoping it might bring us closer, maybe give us something to look forward to. But she brushed it off, saying it wasn't the right time, that she had too much going on with work and her students. I tried to be patient, but inside I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. Then, a week later, I made a discovery I'll never forget. I was packing up our things from that camping trip. Stuff had piled up in the back of the closet, and I was sorting through it when I found one of her jackets. It had this strange, unfamiliar smell. A cologne, but not mine. There was also this faint stain on the sleeve, something I couldn't quite place. I held it up to my face, just staring, trying to make sense of it. My heart started pounding, and for the first time, I let myself wonder if maybe there was someone else. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to throw the jacket back into the closet and pretend I'd never seen it. But I couldn't. I couldn't just go on with this doubt gnawing at me. It was like a seed had been planted in my mind, and now it was growing, taking root. I needed answers. I needed to know if the woman I'd planned my life with, the woman I thought I'd known better than anyone, was hiding something from me. So, that's where it started. Just a few small, strange things here and there, a growing feeling in my gut, and a jacket that didn't smell like it belonged to me. I never thought it had come to this. But here I am, telling this story, hoping that somehow, by the end of it, I'll find the peace I've been searching for. After that day, with the jacket, everything felt different. Every time Christine spoke, every time she left the house, there was this heaviness in the air, like a storm waiting to hit. I could hardly look at her without wondering who she was really texting, who she was meeting, what kind of life she was living behind my back. The worst part was that I couldn't shake the thought that maybe I'd been blind to it all. Maybe while I was out working, putting everything into my career, Christine had been looking somewhere else to fill whatever I wasn't giving her. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. No, I needed proof, something solid. I needed to know, one way or another, what was going on. I started small. I'd glance at her phone when she left it lying around, check her notifications to see if anything unusual popped up. Most of the time, she kept it close to her, even carrying it into the bathroom, something she never used to do. If she had nothing to hide, why was she acting so careful? But then again, I'd ask myself if I was just being paranoid, if maybe the smell on that jacket was nothing more than a strange accident. Maybe it was all in my head. Then one night, while she was asleep, I saw my chance. Her phone was on her bedside table, unlocked. I knew it was wrong, that this was a line I never thought I'd cross. But I had to know. I needed peace of mind. So I took her phone, slipped out of the room, and sat down in the living room, scrolling through her messages. At first, there wasn't much, mostly messages with friends and family, innocent stuff. I started to feel a bit ashamed, like maybe I'd gone too far. But then, I saw one message thread that had no name attached, just a number. And the messages were strange. There were no full sentences, just short, cryptic words and times like they were meeting codes. Things like Tuesday, 7 or see you then. Nothing too revealing, but enough to make my skin crawl. Why was she hiding this? Who was this person? It was hard to sleep that night. I kept looking over at Christine, wondering if I was just being crazy or if she was playing me for a fool. It was hard to look at her the same way after that. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I was in a fog. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't even think straight. I wanted to confront her right there and then, but something told me to hold back. I couldn't go accusing her without real proof. Not if I wanted her to tell me the truth. So, I took another step. I reached out to a private investigator. I'd never done anything like this before. Felt strange, almost surreal, like I was some character in a bad movie. But I didn't see another way. The investigator's name was Lauren. She'd been recommended by a friend who'd gone through a rough divorce a few years back. She was calm, professional, didn't ask a lot of questions, just the facts. I told her what I knew about the jacket, the phone messages, the late nights, and that look on Christine's face I couldn't shake from my mind. Lauren listened, took notes, and said she'd be in touch as soon as she found anything. The days that followed felt like torture. Every time Christine went out, I'd wonder if she was really at work, really with her friends, or if she was with someone else. I tried to keep my cool around her, acting like everything was normal, but I could tell she noticed something was off. She'd ask me if everything was okay, and I just shrugged, trying to brush it off as work stress. One night, she came home late, saying she'd stayed after school to help a few students with a project. I looked at her, nodding, but inside I felt a sickness. I couldn't even remember the last time she'd voluntarily stayed late for work, especially without telling me first. But there she was, looking me straight in the eye, giving me some story about her students. And the worst part was that she didn't seem bothered by it at all. She just changed out of her clothes, threw them in the laundry, and went to bed like it was nothing. 2 days later, I got a call from Lauren. She'd tracked Christine's whereabouts the night she claimed she'd been working late. Turns out, she'd gone to a restaurant on the other side of town and wasn't alone. Lauren didn't have a photo of who she was with, just a brief description that sent a chill down my spine. She said he was tall, well-dressed, a bit older, and seemed familiar with Christine. I didn't need her to spell it out. I knew who it was. It was Richard, my boss, the man I'd admired, the man I thought was on my side, even a friend, the man who'd been on that camping trip with us. The pieces started falling into place. The way Christine's mood had changed after that trip, the strange messages, her new schedule, all of it suddenly made sense. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, betrayal, sadness, it all hit me at once. I kept replaying every memory I had of the two of them, little things I dismissed as nothing. All the times she'd laughed at his jokes, all the moments she'd complimented him on his leadership. I'd been so naive, thinking it was just harmless admiration. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the walls, feeling like my entire life had been flipped upside down. I wanted to confront Christine right then, wake her up, and demand the truth. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I needed to be sure. If she'd been lying to me all this time, she'd just lie again. I needed more. The next day, I called Lauren back. I asked her if she could install some surveillance, maybe even a tracking app on Christine's phone. I hated myself for it, for how low I was sinking, but I was past the point of pride. I had to know, even if it destroyed me. Lauren set everything up quietly, professionally, and within a few hours, I had access to Christine's location, her messages, everything. It was a strange feeling having that kind of power. Part of me wanted to stop, to turn away from the truth I felt was just around the corner. But there was no turning back now. A few days later, while I was at work, Lauren called me again. This time, she had what she called concrete evidence. Photos, messages, proof. She sent them over in an encrypted file, and I opened it in my office, my hands shaking. There, on my screen, was everything I'd been dreading. Photos of Christine, laughing, leaning in close to Richard. Messages between them that I could barely bring myself to read. They'd been seeing each other for months. Not just once, not just a few innocent meetings. There were pictures of them at his house, at dinners, even at places Christine and I used to go together. The worst was a video, a short clip, blurry but unmistakable. Christine and Richard sitting in his living room, her hand in his. I had to look away, couldn't bring myself to watch the whole thing. I'd wanted proof, and now I had it. But as I sat there, staring at my laptop screen, all I felt was emptiness. Everything I'd thought my marriage was, all the trust and love and commitment, it had all been a lie. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and knew what I had to do next. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to confront her, but I wasn't going to do it in anger. I was beyond that. It felt like something inside me had shifted. Whatever love or hope I'd held onto was gone. All that was left was the need for truth and the chance to let her know I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. I spent that day rehearsing what I'd say, going over it in my mind until I could barely think straight. I'd never imagined I'd be in a position like this. 5 years of marriage, and here I was about to tell my own wife that I knew about her betrayal with my boss. The absurdity of it was almost laughable. Almost. That evening, she came home later than usual, claiming again that she'd been helping students. She had a slight, nervous smile when she walked through the door, like she was trying too hard to seem casual. It was like she didn't even care enough to come up with something better. She thought I'd keep swallowing whatever excuse she threw at me, that I'd go on blindly accepting her little stories without question. But this time, I didn't respond with my usual nod. I didn't pretend to believe her. I waited until she'd set down her things, and then I looked her straight in the eye. Christine, I said quietly, we need to talk. She froze just for a second, before looking at me with that practiced, sweet expression. Oh, she asked, forcing a little laugh. What's wrong, hon? I took a breath, steadying myself. I know about you and Richard, I said as calmly as I could manage. For a moment, she looked like she didn't understand, like my words had shocked her right out of her comfortable little world. Then, as if on reflex, she shook her head and let out a nervous laugh. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice a touch too high. There's nothing going on with Richard. That's ridiculous. I felt myself getting angry, but I kept my voice level. Christine, I've seen the messages. I've seen the pictures. I know everything. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she just stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and, was it guilt? For a second, I thought I saw regret, maybe even shame, but it quickly faded, replaced by something else. Defiance, maybe? How? How did you? She stammered, but she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. She knew there was no way out of this. I didn't say anything, just let the silence fill the room. I could see her mind working, searching for a way to turn this around, to find an explanation that would let her walk away clean. But I'd seen everything, and there was nothing she could say that would change that. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and trembling. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said, looking down at the floor. I didn't think. I interrupted her, my voice calm but firm. You didn't think what? That I'd find out? That I'd notice you pulling away? That I'd let you keep lying to my face? She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, Brandon. I swear. It just happened. I let out a bitter laugh. It just happened? Christine, this wasn't a one-time mistake. You didn't trip and fall into another man's arms. You made a choice, over and over again. Don't insult me by pretending it was an accident. Her expression shifted then, from guilt to frustration. Brandon, I don't expect you to understand. Things haven't been the same between us for a long time. I've been, feeling lost. Lost, I repeated, shaking my head. Lost enough to lie to me for months? Lost enough to go behind my back with someone I trusted? Lost enough to pretend to be my wife while you were with another man? She wiped a tear from her cheek, looking away. I know it's hard to understand, but it wasn't about you. I needed something more. I needed to feel alive again. Alive! The word stung, as if she were telling me our life together was some kind of prison. I thought we were planning a life together, Christine. A family. A future. I've been working so hard trying to build something for us. And you. My voice trailed off as I struggled to keep my composure. And you just what? Threw it all away? She looked back at me then, her expression hardening. Maybe if you'd been paying more attention, you would have noticed that I needed more. I'm not saying it's your fault, but I wasn't happy, Brandon. I haven't been for a long time. Her words hit me like a slap. It was like she was blaming me for her choices, for her lies. I couldn't believe the person standing in front of me was the same woman I'd married. The same woman I'd loved, trusted, built my dreams around. You weren't happy? I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. So, you decided to destroy everything we had instead of talking to me? Instead of giving me a chance to fix things? She looked away, her jaw tight. I tried, Brandon. I really did. But you were so wrapped up in your job, in your ambitions, that you didn't see what was happening right in front of you. I felt my fists clenching, but I kept them on my sides, forcing myself to stay calm. That's low, Christine. You could have talked to me. You could have told me you were struggling. But instead, you decided to go behind my back with my boss. She didn't answer, just stood there, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. The silence between us was suffocating, filled with everything left unsaid, everything broken. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady but cold. I'm filing for divorce. The word seemed to hit her harder than anything else. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. Brandon, please, she whispered, stepping forward. Don't do this. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can work through this. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. We can fix this. I love you. I shook my head. No, Christine. You don't get to come back from this. You've been lying to me for months, betraying everything we had, and now you want to fix it? It's too late. She was crying now, her voice desperate. Please, Brandon, don't throw this away. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. It was a stupid, selfish thing to do, and I'll never forgive myself for it. Just don't end this. Don't leave me. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. I could see the regret in her eyes, the weight of her guilt. But it wasn't enough. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. I can't stay with someone I can't trust, Christine, I said quietly. We're done. She sobbed, covering her face with her hands, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, just a sense of finality, of cold clarity. I turned to leave, and she grabbed my arm, her voice pleading. Brandon, please. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance to make it right. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with Richard. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't leave me. I pulled my arm free, looking her straight in the eyes. I don't want anything from you, Christine. Not anymore. I walked out of the room, leaving her behind, still crying, still pleading. For the first time in months, I felt free. Leaving Christine that night was supposed to bring relief. But the reality hit me harder than I'd expected. The house felt strange, hollow, like I didn't belong there anymore. Every room was filled with memories. Our wedding photos, souvenirs from trips, little things we'd collected over the years. All of it felt like a mockery of what I thought we'd had. I didn't go back to our bedroom. I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, barely closing my eyes. I kept running over her words in my head, trying to make sense of it all. I needed to feel alive, she'd said, like being with me had drained the life out of her. And then she'd had the nerve to blame me for it, to make it seem like her betrayal was something I'd driven her to. The more I thought about it, the colder I felt. That night, any leftover hope I might have had for saving our marriage vanished completely. The next morning, I called Lauren, my attorney. She'd been the one I'd turned to when my suspicions first started, and I knew she'd help me see this through. I went to her office that afternoon, still feeling like I was moving through a fog. Lauren greeted me with that calm, professional demeanor that had helped me through the worst of my doubts. She didn't waste time with small talk. She knew why I was there. So, you're ready to move forward with the divorce? She asked, her voice steady and clear. I nodded, the words catching in my throat for a second before I forced them out. Yes, I want this over with. I need to start over. She looked at me, her expression softening just a little. Brandon, I know this is difficult, but you're doing the right thing. I've seen this before. It's going to be hard, but it will get easier. Lauren had been through countless cases like mine. She'd seen men and women come through her office, devastated, broken, and she'd watched them rebuild. I wanted to believe her, but at that moment, it was hard to see any future beyond the anger and betrayal that filled my mind. We discussed the details. She laid out the options: division of assets, property, alimony. Lauren suggested we try for an uncontested divorce, meaning Christine wouldn't have much of a fight over assets if she accepted. I didn't want to fight her for every penny. I just wanted her out of my life, with as little pain as possible. I can draft the papers and file them by the end of the week, Lauren said. Do you want me to reach out to Christine's attorney? Or would you prefer to handle it yourself? I hesitated, but I knew I couldn't keep avoiding it. Go ahead and contact her attorney. The sooner we start, the sooner it's over. Lauren nodded, her eyes steady on mine. It's going to feel worse before it gets better, Brandon. That's just the reality of divorce. But we'll take it one step at a time. I thanked her, grateful for her professionalism, and left her office feeling drained. I sat in my car for a while, staring out the window, feeling like I'd left a part of myself behind. That's when it really hit me. I wasn't just losing Christine. I was losing the future I'd built in my mind, the plans, the life we'd imagined. And that loss, it was almost harder to bear than the betrayal itself. Over the next few weeks, I tried to keep busy. I went to work, focused on projects, threw myself into anything that would keep my mind off Christine and Richard. I didn't tell anyone at work what was going on. The last thing I wanted was to be the subject of office gossip, or worse, to see the pity in their eyes. But keeping it all inside wasn't easy. The anger simmered just below the surface, And every time I saw Richard's name pop up in an email or on a meeting invite, I felt a wave of disgust. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to HR and told them I was leaving. Personal reasons, I said. They tried to talk me into staying, mentioning my recent contract win, my future with the company, but I didn't care. Staying there, working under Richard, seeing him continue as if nothing had happened. I knew I couldn't do it. I handed in my resignation, and that was that. Without work to keep me distracted, the days felt longer. I had a lot of time to think, maybe too much. I found myself questioning everything, wondering where it had gone wrong, if there was something I could have done differently. I knew Christine's choices were her own, that I couldn't shoulder all the blame, but it didn't stop the doubts from creeping in. Lauren reached out every few days to update me on the progress of the divorce. She was efficient, moving things along quickly, which I appreciated. Christine's attorney was cooperative, and surprisingly, she wasn't fighting the terms. I guess she knew she didn't have much ground to stand on. Part of me was relieved, but another part of me resented how easy it seemed for her to let go. One day, as I was sifting through old files, trying to organize the mess Christine had left in her wake, I stumbled on some photos from our honeymoon. We'd gone to the mountains, just the two of us, hiking, exploring, talking about our future. In one of the photos, she was laughing, her face bright, full of life. And I couldn't help but wonder, when had that changed? When had that laughter turned into the quiet, guarded looks, the lies, the secrets? That night, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called up some old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. We met up for a drink, and for the first time since this all began, I felt something close to normal. They didn't ask too many questions, just offered their support, their company. It was a small thing, but it reminded me that my life didn't have to end because my marriage did. In the days that followed, I started taking small steps to move forward. I joined a gym, something I've been meaning to do for ages. I forced myself to get out of the house, to reconnect with people, to rebuild the parts of my life I'd let fall apart in my focus on work and my marriage. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the sadness would come crashing down, unexpected and overwhelming. But each day, I got a little stronger. Then, one evening, I received a text from Christine. She wanted to meet, to talk things over. I stared at the message for a long time, torn between the anger that still lingered and the need for some kind of closure. In the end, I agreed, thinking maybe this would be the final step in letting go. We met at a coffee shop near our old apartment. She looked different, tired, maybe a little worn. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes before she spoke. I just wanted to apologize, Brandon, she said quietly. For everything. Her voice was shaky, and I could tell she was struggling. But I stayed silent, waiting to hear what she'd say next. I know I hurt you, she continued, and I can't undo that. But I needed you to know. I didn't do it to hurt you. I was just lost. Lost? I echoed, feeling a familiar bitterness rise. Christine, you destroyed our life together. You betrayed my trust, and you expect me to believe you were just lost? She flinched, and for a moment, I thought I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. I know it sounds hollow, Brandon, and maybe it is, but I've spent the last few weeks thinking about everything about us, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. I let her words sink in, not really sure if they meant anything to me anymore. I'd already made my peace with it, or at least as much peace as I could. But seeing her there, vulnerable, stripped of her defenses, it was strangely freeing. I appreciate that, Christine, I said finally. But an apology doesn't change anything. We're done. I don't hate you, but I can't forgive you either. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but I won't be a part of it. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the woman I used to know. But it was too late. Whatever we'd had was gone, and we both knew it. We parted ways that night, and I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight I'd been carrying around seemed lighter, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. After our meeting, I thought that would be the last I'd hear from Christine. But a few days later, the texts and voicemail started. She kept begging for a second chance, saying she'd do anything to fix things. I'll leave Richard, she promised in one message, then went on to suggest therapy and starting fresh. She even mentioned starting a family, something she'd always dodged before. I could tell she was desperate, realizing what life would look like without me. One evening, after ignoring her calls for days, I finally picked up. Her voice was hopeful, almost frantic. "Brandon, please just give me a chance. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to fix it." "Christine, stop." I cut in, tired of the empty apologies. "We're done. You've broken every ounce of trust we had, and now that it's inconvenient, you want it all back? It's not that easy." "But I still love you, Brandon," she said, her voice cracking. "I know that's hard to believe, but I was just, I don't know, confused." "Confused?" I felt my anger rising. "You lied to me for months and call it confusion? Love isn't supposed to feel like this." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm sorry, Christine, but you already lost me." There was silence. Then, quietly, she began to cry, but I didn't let it get to me. I hung up, feeling strangely at peace. I was finally ready to move on. Days passed quieter. Her calls slowed down, then stopped altogether. Lauren informed me that Christine's lawyer had reviewed the divorce papers, and, surprisingly, Christine wasn't fighting the terms. I thought she'd accepted the finality, but then, one evening, she showed up at my door, looking pale and anxious. "Brandon," she whispered, "I need to talk to you. Please." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the couch, staring down, her hands shaking. The silence was heavy, tense, until she finally looked up, her face filled with a fear I'd never seen before. "I went to the doctor a few days ago," she started, voice trembling. "I wasn't feeling well, so they did some tests. And I tested positive for HIV." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. HIV? My mind raced, everything inside me screaming in disbelief. Had she really put my life at risk for the sake of her affair? "I'm so sorry, Brandon," she sobbed, covering her face. "I didn't know. I didn't think." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Did you even think, Christine, about what this could mean for me?" She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, but she had no answer, just a helpless, broken expression. I thought I was being careful," she whispered. "I thought it was just a phase, something I'd get over. I didn't think it would go this far." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the anger. "You thought," I nearly shouted. "You were so wrapped up in yourself that you didn't care who you hurt." "I know," she whispered, defeated. "I know I've ruined everything. I thought you should know, in case you want to get tested." I stared at her, numb. It felt like my entire life had been shattered, and now I was left to pick up the pieces alone. After a long pause, I spoke, my voice cold. "Thank you for telling me. But that doesn't change anything between us. I'll get tested, but you and I were done, Christine. For good." She nodded, face crumpling as the last shred of hope faded. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but I couldn't bear to hear it. I stood, signaling that it was time for her to go. "Goodbye, Christine," I said, my tone hollow. She rose slowly, walking to the door without another word. I closed it behind her, feeling a finality I hadn't before. Whatever life we'd shared, whatever love I'd once felt, it was gone. In the days that followed, I went through the process of getting tested. Waiting for the results was its own kind of hell, a reminder of every choice that had led me here. But when the doctor finally called, I felt a wave of relief that I could hardly believe. Negative. A weight lifted. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again, like I could start to rebuild from the ashes of my life. Walking out of that clinic, I made a promise to myself. I would put Christine behind me, her lies, her betrayal, all of it. I would move forward no matter how long it took. And for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a glimmer of real hope. And this time, I wasn't going to waste it. A few weeks after that final goodbye, I thought I was done with Christine. I'd pushed through the anger, the sadness, and somehow, I was finally finding some peace. I'd even started to consider what a fresh start might look like, moving to a new place, maybe looking for work in a different city, far from memories of her. But then, one evening, I received a call from her mother. She sounded upset, almost frantic, asking if I could come over. Against my better judgment, I went, knowing her parents had been blindsided by everything and probably needed some answers. When I got there, I found Christine sitting at the dining room table, looking worse than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale. She barely looked up as I walked in. Her mother excused herself, leaving us alone. I wasn't sure what to expect, but Christine looked broken. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Brandon, I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry. For everything. For how much I hurt you." I stared at her, unmoved. I'd heard apologies before, but this felt different. She wasn't pleading, wasn't asking for anything. She just looked tired, defeated. "I know I've ruined everything," she continued, her eyes filling with tears. "You were the best thing in my life, and I threw it away. And now I'm paying for it." She told me then that she'd been diagnosed with advanced HIV, and that the impact on her health was worse than she'd expected. Her relationship with Richard had unraveled as well. He'd reacted with anger when he found out, and things had turned ugly. She'd lost her job, her friends, her standing in the community. It was as though everything she'd pursued had slipped away, leaving her with nothing. A long silence fell between us. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but it was hard to find sympathy after what she'd put me through. "Christine," I said finally, "I appreciate you telling me this. I do. But you have to understand, I can't fix this for you. I can't be the one to make it better." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I don't expect you to. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I took a deep breath, surprised at the calm I felt. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "And I forgive you. But forgiving you doesn't mean I'll ever trust you again." This is where our story ends. Her shoulders slumped, and she nodded. I could see the weight of her choices in her expression, a final understanding of the life she'd destroyed. Not just ours, but her own. Without another word, I stood up, feeling that strange sense of release as I walked out the door. In the weeks that followed, I tried to focus on my own healing. I didn't hear from Christine again, and though there were times I wondered about her, I didn't let it pull me back. I had a future to build. One that didn't include looking over my shoulder at the wreckage of my past. With the divorce finalized, I felt a sense of closure that was hard to put into words. For the first time, the house felt like my own space. I could finally put away the memories, clear out the reminders, and start filling it with new experiences, new hope. Maybe one day, I'd be open to love again. But for now, just having peace was enough. The finalization of the divorce brought a strange sense of freedom, though it came with an emptiness that I didn't expect. I'd spent so long wrapped up in Christine and the chaos of her betrayal that when it was finally over, there was a void. But I knew that void wasn't meant to be filled with anger or regret. It was space to rebuild. I began focusing on things I'd neglected over the years. Simple things, organizing the house, reconnecting with old friends, picking up hobbies I'd let fall to the wayside. I started running again, feeling the tension ease with every mile. I spent more time with family, something I'd often let slip while I was busy with work and married life. In one of those quiet moments, I realized that I was actually grateful for the chance to start over. Life hadn't gone the way I'd planned, but I could see new possibilities. There was something empowering about having a clean slate, even if it had come from a place of such pain. A few months later, I took a new job in a different city. It was a smaller company, but it came with the kind of team I could trust and respect. I found myself looking forward to going to work each day, the lingering memories of Richard and his betrayal fading into the background. I didn't need to look over my shoulder anymore. Around that same time, some friends encouraged me to join a weekly group that met to discuss life changes and how to move forward after big transitions. At first, I was hesitant. Talking about personal stuff had never been my style. But I decided to give it a try, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions I'd made. Listening to others who had also experienced heartbreak and betrayal helped me feel less alone. It reminded me that everyone's carrying their own burdens and that healing is a shared journey. One evening, after the group meeting, I was out with a few members, just having coffee, when one of them asked if I'd ever consider dating again. I laughed it off at first, but the idea lingered. I wasn't ready yet. Not really. But for the first time, I realized I wasn't closed off to the idea forever. Maybe one day, when I'd healed a bit more, I could try again. This time, though, I know what I wanted. I know what kind of love I deserved. In the meantime, I filled my life with meaningful things. I volunteered on weekends, took up woodworking, and made peace with myself. I knew that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant finding the strength to leave the past behind. One night, a year after the divorce, I was sitting on my porch, thinking back over everything. I didn't feel the anger or sadness anymore, just a calm acceptance. Christine's choices had changed my life forever, but they didn't define me. In the end, I'd managed to hold on to my values, my integrity, and my self-respect. I'd survived. With a deep breath, I looked up at the stars, feeling that weight lift completely for the first time. I'd come through the darkest chapter of my life, and now there was only one direction left to go: forward. The future was mine to shape, and for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to embrace it.